LCARA Ham Radio presents a Time Machine Tuesday vintage video release.
Welcome to Lake Cumberland Amateur Radio Association. You can find us at LCARA.net, on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Instagram. If you're enjoying the videos we're producing here at LCARA, please help our club out by hitting that subscribe button. Also, give us some feedback on our videos. Click the like button, share with anybody who may find it interesting, and be sure and hit the bell icon to make sure you get notified of the next video release.
Well, hello there. This is KY4BDP Brian for the Lake Cumberland Amateur Radio Association. Well, who's this fella? Well, that's KY4CKP, and he's, I guess, showing off the two solar panels that we want to use for the solar panel charging project for the emergency communications trailer. We want to put these together with some hinges, do the wiring, take advantage of a charge controller inside of the trailer, and then charge the house battery on the trailer with these two panels on a nice sunny day or even a partially sunny day. And so that was the basic project. This is going to be part one of that project. Now what we're looking at here are the hinges that we're going to use for the two panels, and we've just put the panels facing each other and then utilized some clamps to keep them together. These piano hinges were just laying around the shop. Now, like a lot of Elmers in the Ham Radio Club, they've got a lot of new old stock just laying around. A lot of these guys are pack rats, and so they've got pieces, parts all over the place, and AC4DM is no exception. If you need it, he's probably got it. And sure enough, he's got piano hinges. Now, the original piano hinges were a little bit too long, so we needed to go ahead and size them more appropriately. And that's what we're showing here is we actually took a piano hinge and we took a bandsaw and basically cut it in half, and then placed the piano hinges the same amount of distance from the ends so that we would get nice rigid but supportive hinge for the two panels. Now the panels are not light. These are 20-year-old panels. Yes, you heard me correctly. AC4DM has had these panels for a very long time and just hadn't gotten around to using them on a project. In fact, he's got a couple more we're going to use for one of our repeater sites. So in any event, we need to take those hinges and install them. And one of the first things we need to do is get an idea. Now, if you look closely at these hinges, they're not terribly wide, and so we need to be careful that when we drill holes into the aluminum, which by the way was a little bit thicker in going down from this direction, that we don't go into the substrate. We kind of wish the hinges had been a little bit wider, but this is what we had to work with. And so we need to mark this both from the edge, top edge to your right, and along each of the holes. Now we chose to basically skip a hole, so we use a bottom hole, skip a hole, go to the top, skip a hole, go to the bottom in a zigzag configuration. Also, what we're looking at here is when we put the panels together, we also need to open up the electrical box, or the current overcurrent, I'll get it right in a minute, the current protection, we'll just call it that. There's some diodes, I'll show you that in another picture here in just a minute. So we'll be opening up that black little panel, not only to wire the solar panels, but to also double check that everything is going to work given their age, which, by the way, we didn't get this on camera, but each of these panels is brand new, effectively, had never been used. So we checked them out, and they actually came in at 21.5 volts each, and we're going to put them in parallel going into our charge controller, which is a 12-volt charge controller. So what we're looking at here is we've actually measured from the edge the vertical line that you see there, and we've also drilled our first hole to get an idea of what that's going to look like, make sure we don't go into the substrate and so forth, and we'll want to repeat this. Again, we're going in an alternating pattern, so we're using a bottom and then a top as we move from left to right. So bottom, top, so that the screw heads don't line up and prevent us from opening the two panels as wide as we would like them to be, which we'll show you in another shot. So here we've got a couple of the fasteners in place. Now originally we had screws about 1 inch and a nut with a star washer to kind of dig into the underside. But we found that the way that these way we were drilling the holes and so forth, that we didn't have a lot of, shall we say, wiggle room to make sure we're not going into the substrate, that we ended up going with a fastener instead of these screws and nuts. But in any event, you can kind of get a feel of how we're going to lay this out. And in the next shot, we actually can see that zigzag pattern, although we didn't follow that exactly on each of the hinges, but it is good enough. So here we go. You can kind of see that zigzag pattern from starting from the left going to the right, but due to how the hinge was actually lining up a little bit and not wanting to drill into the substrate, we used the 2 fasteners on the right just at the top. We had enough screws there though on the other panel that it's really good. This is just the first piano hinge. The second piano hinge was essentially done the same way, close to the top and close to the bottom, so that when the 2 panels open up, they have enough support in that open configuration. It turned out really, really well. Again, this is just finding parts laying around the shop that hadn't been used for any other project up to that point. Now this is the actual electrical box that we're going to attach our wiring to. The bottom left terminal is for your negative. The bottom right terminal, far right, is your positive terminal. The diodes up at the top prevent current from coming back into the panel if you have a voltage mismatch where the current wants to run in the wrong direction. The current will stop. Those diodes prevent the current from damaging the photovoltaic cells, and that's what they're for. And then what we have to do is just wire some zip cord into the left and the right terminals, and you can see the little round hole on the right is where the wire will exit. Now AC4DM also had some fittings. I'm always amazed at how many parts he has laying around the shop, and you can see the gray fitting on the right hand side. Plus inside that fitting, you can't see it, is a little rubber piece that you can put inside that fitting to prevent water intrusion or critters getting into your electrical panel. So we installed that. It actually has a retaining nut on the inside of the box to keep the gray piece in place, and then it has the rubber piece just inside that cap, and then the wire exits after it's been connected to the 2 posts. You can see we use a zip tie on the far left, utilizing an existing hole in the panel. That keeps the wire in place and prevents any kind of stress on the wire being pulled against the panel as much as possible. You can't see it in this particular shot because of the end of the wire, but there's Anderson power poles on the end for a quick disconnect and connection. We need to create a Y cable to connect the 2 panels in parallel to maintain our 12 volts going into the charge controller, which will be coming up in a couple of photos here in just a moment. But that's how we affix the 2 wires, and the other one's just the opposite. Alrighty, so here's KY4CKP showing the finished results of putting the panels together, but we're not done. It's kind of like a 4-part process. We had to put the panels together, we had to create the wiring and the Y connection for connecting the panels in parallel. We had to connect them to the charging controller, and then we have to install this in the trailer itself. We used a 25-foot cord for the cables that are going to connect to the panels to go into the trailer, so we can get the panels far enough away from the trailer on either side, by the way, depending on where the sun happened to be positioned. But that's what the panels look like after the hinges were installed. In our next piece here, we've got just a little bit of video of AC4DM doing a little bit of soldering on some of the contacts that we're going to put inside the Anderson power poles. These are relatively thick, and we wanted to make sure that we have good connectivity. So this wire was a little bit thicker than what we used coming out of the panels, and this is what ultimately is going to go into some Anderson power poles for connect. Now we're going to put a pigtail on the charge controller that is ring terminals going into the charge controller, and Anderson power pole on the other end, and then this end will plug into that. So you can see the charge controller here with those ring terminals on the right hand side, the heat sink on the top there in black, and you can see a length of cable about 25 feet to make sure that the panels can be set up somewhere outside of the trailer where they can be in good sunshine. And then we actually already have conduit holes in the bottom of the trailer to allow cables, antenna cabling and so forth to come up inside the trailer. So we hopefully have enough length there, and if necessary we can create another length of cable to extend it if we need to get the panels a little bit further away. But we thought 25 feet was going to be plenty. So this is the back side of the charge controller, and in our next picture here we'll have the front side of the charge controller. Yet again, a charge controller that AC4DM has had for quite a while. Not the latest charge controllers, but what's really neat about this is making use of something that he's had for years and putting it in play. Because again, a lot of these Elmers have a lot of equipment that's new old stock that just hasn't been used in a project. And it's still perfectly fine. And for our purposes of charging a single, possibly a dual house battery a little bit later down the road, that's all we needed. So just our last picture here coming up in just a moment is going to show where we're going to install the charge controller on a small little rack that we've installed in the emergency communications trailer. It'll go underneath this red panel, and he's going to create a faceplate for that. You can see we already have Anderson power pole connectivity there for radios and whatnot. So this ends part 1 of the solar panel project, charging project for the emergency communications trailer, and we just want to hopefully give you guys some inspiration. I'm KY4 BDP for the Lake Cumberland Amateur Radio Association. Part 2 will be coming up a little bit later as we get back to the emergency communications trailer. Enjoy yourselves, create some of these projects, and have fun.